Briefly summarize your experience gained throughout your career and what qualifies you to serve as the Newberg-Dundee Police Chief.
So I have, over 20 years of experience in law enforcement. I've worked in different municipalities and also currently working at the Port of Portland Police Department, serving Portland International Airport and the Port of Portland. So during that 20 years, I've done a variety of different things. I've worked starting as a police officer, working as a field training officer, working different investigative assignments, working in narcotics. I was a canine handler for a period of time. And I've worked my way up through the ranks, sergeant, lieutenant, and now captain. And during that time, I've gained a significant amount of experience in working with the members of the community, working with different law enforcement agencies, different government agencies, and working with community members, solving problems, identifying challenges, and building relationships. Over the last couple of years with the Port of Portland, I've had the opportunity to really manage the day-to-day operations of the police department. I've stepped in and filled the role of acting police chief a couple of different times. So I've gained a lot of experience through those opportunities. I've been able to assess some of the challenges that we face in our department, and being able to make some strategic changes throughout the organization, not just changing for the sake of changing, but working strategically with the stakeholders within the department, and also with our community members and the other members of the Port of Portland. So we've through all of that, I think I've gained the experience necessary to serve the citizens in the community of Newberg. And I think my qualifications, are just my proven track record with work ethic and ability to communicate and build relationships with members of the community, members of the department, and other businesses and governmental agencies. And I think also my ability to strategically analyze the operations and look to continue improving and to always move forward. And my philosophy is that we've never reached the finish line. This business is always changing and evolving. The communities are always growing, changing, and it's important to continue to work with the community, work with the stakeholders, work with your employees, and identify ways that we can always look to improve ourselves, growing from the strengths that we have, building upon those, and identifying some areas where we can do better, and trying to find ways that we can do that as a team.
I have a bachelor's degree in business from George Fox University here in Newberg. I'm a graduate of the FBI National Academy. I'm a certified police officer with an executive level certification through the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training. I've worked here for the Newberg-Dundee Police Department for 24 years full-time. 17 of those years are in supervisory and command roles. Of the 24 years, I've held many positions within the department. A few of those would be patrol officer, detective. I've been a patrol and detective sergeant both, lieutenant, captain, and I'm currently serving in the interim role. I'm very fortunate to be in that role. I've had opportunities to work at other agencies, but this is the community that I live, and my family lives, I live here, and I'm invested here. During my career, I've served as the accreditation manager, evidence auditor, managed the police policy manual, and been part of the major crimes team for over 20 years. I've been part of internal affairs, created a new use of force and database reporting system, obtained over $100,000 worth of equipment at no cost to the city. I've reorganized our command and supervisor structure to provide 24 hours of supervision with no added cost or personnel to the budget. While in this interim role, our management team that I've selected and put together, we've promoted 2 sergeants and a corporal. So those would have been positive experiences. I think we've selected the right people in management, and they'll lead with compassion and humility. Those are important cornerstone values within our department. In the last 7 years, the Newberg and Dundee have been one of the safest cities in Oregon. This is accomplished by hiring and training capable, motivated workforce that's supported by the police administrations and the citizens we serve. You must hit the right balance. I think you have to hit the right balance of proactive enforcement without being too intrusive. Throughout my career, I've built relationships with civic groups, local business owners, and sought out relationships with our Latinx community recently. I've been fortunate to be able to have a good work relationship with our employees and our law enforcement partners throughout Yamhill County. I think it's important to point out that I received an unsolicited letter of support from our Newberg-Dundee Police Association. And throughout my career, I've proven that I'll do what is right and what is just, even when it's not popular. I continue to work hard and ensure equity in policing, and will lead with humility.
I'd like to start just briefly with my upbringing. I was born in Oklahoma to 2 amazing parents. They were public school teachers, between the 2 of them with over 70 years of experience doing that. We lived on a ranch, so learned a lot of common sense and just what it was like to be an important citizen and community member through their leadership as I was growing up. We had horses, cattle, the whole 9 yards there. So I came from a really sort of rooted background. I went to undergraduate education at the University of Arkansas, where I majored in psychology and physics and minored in math. I promise I'm not too much of a nerd, but that's kind of an odd combination, but really fell in love with psychology and have utilized that ever since I obtained that degree. And then my master's degree as well is from Eastern Michigan University, also in psychology, and there I minored in management. Best thing that happened to me when I was in Michigan is I met my wife, Shannon. She and I have been together for 17 years. She's also an executive over in the research field, and the 2 of us really help each other in our professional capacities in that way. I started my police career in the city of College Station, Texas, back in 2007. And College Station at that time served a community of about 60,000 residents and is also home to Texas A&M University. So they had about 40,000 additional students there whenever I was there. I served as a patrol officer, as a field training officer, as a member of the hostage negotiation team, and a crisis intervention officer there. It was a great place to learn how to be a police officer. They sent me to an incredible academy put on by the Texas Engineering and Extension Service, affiliated with Texas A&M University. And there I really learned the importance of initial police training that needs to far exceed, just what's basically required by the state. But it was a great place to learn how to be a cop. College Station PD is a CALEA, which is the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement flagship accredited agency at the national level. So it's a very, very professional agency, and it was great to have that background. In 2010, my wife and I moved to the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex in Texas for professional opportunities for both of us. And there I served as the next decade in the Plano Police Department. The city of Plano is a suburb of Dallas, about 275,000 residents, a lot of corporate headquarters there in Plano, a lot of diversity, really great city. Also a CALEA flagship accredited agency. I promoted quickly through the ranks of sergeant and lieutenant. As a lieutenant, I managed several different units, including high visibility enforcement unit, which is a traffic unit or neighborhood police officer unit, which engaged in some specific problem-oriented policing and very specific community-oriented policing strategies with our persons experiencing homelessness in our downtown area. And then also over on the west side of town in a very urban, dense environment, we opened a storefront police substation there and partnered with those stakeholders in kind of a different residential mixed use way that Plano had not experienced up to that point. Also supervised our public safety officer unit. And then I transitioned into supervising our training unit, which trained all sworn and civilian members of the department, almost 700 total individuals. And under my leadership there, we opened a regional police academy where we trained our officers as well as the officers from 4 other member cities. And we really instituted situationally dependent scenario-based training, which produced some great results for our officers to be trained to really know how to handle the complexities of professional police work once they got out of the academy. And we also incorporated that methodology of training into our in-service training for officers as well. I also supervise the special events unit, where we plan for the public safety aspect of very large scale and smaller scale special events, drawing anywhere from tens of thousands of people to our balloon festival or 4th of July fireworks show to your typical 5K fun runs and things like that. And then finally, I was our Homeland Security, Hometown Security Lieutenant, where we partnered with the Department of Homeland Security at the federal level, our public and private stakeholders, and our faith-based leaders to ensure that the city was well prepared for an all hazards approach to managing disasters. So my experience in Plano really set me up well to serve as a police chief. And in October of 2019, I obtained the position of police chief for the city of Forney, which is also a smaller suburb of the Dallas area in Texas. Is actually really similar in size to Newberg, with many additional residents right outside the city limits. So they have about 25,000 residents in the city and about 20 more immediately outside. So while I was at Forney, we were able to facilitate a lot of great success. The first thing that I did is put together a committee of folks, and we established a mission statement that everybody bought into, from the line officer level to our records technicians, all the way up to the command staff, city leaders, and ultimately citizens. I didn't write the mission statement. The mission statement was written by all of those groups. And then we established four core performance measures to ensure that we were actually accomplishing that mission in a data-driven, deliberate way. And we assess those variables on a continuous basis. Very proud of the fact and happy to report during my tenure there, we reduced violent crime by 10%. We achieved the highest customer service ratings in the 4th quarter of 2020 from our citizens who actually experienced our police services in that last quarter of 2020, which was the highest the department had received. We reduced response times, and we instituted geographic-based community-oriented policing across the board in the department while I was there. So my life experience, educational background, experience in 2 larger professional agencies, coupled with my experience of leading the Forney Police Department, very similar in size to Newberg, rapidly growing, really sets me up well to serve the Newberg-Dundee Police Department as its chief in a great way. And I'm excited about that opportunity.
I've had a 25-year career so far. And in that 25 years, I've had a lot of opportunities. I worked in a mid-sized agency similar to Newberg-Dundee, which was the City of Troutdale Police Department. While I was there, I was able to do various things, which was really great, actually coming up in a mid-sized department, because you're able to actually do a lot more and become more well-rounded in a smaller agency. So I was attached to the patrol division originally. I very quickly became part of the mentoring, coaching team as a field training officer, as a firearms instructor, a less lethal instructor, and as a use of force instructor. I spent many years doing that until I was promoted to sergeant in about 2007, where I started to realize that I didn't want to end my career as a sergeant. And I started to get really excited about executive leadership. And so I returned to college during that time. I was also running my own construction business at the same time. So I was running a construction business, doing law enforcement, and going to school, all in an effort to learn more about public budgeting and planning and research in regards to law enforcement. And so in that capacity as a sergeant, I was able to do that because I was tasked with developing community policing projects such as Neighborhood Watch, coordinating community events such as parades and activities in different parks throughout Troutdale and East County. I started to take an interest in public budgeting because I thought, we're spending the money, I should know where it comes from and how it gets to us. And that would help me maybe move along further. While I was a sergeant, I was assigned supervision of detectives, patrol SROs, school resource officers, our TriMet division, gangs, hostage negotiation, and SWAT team at various times. In about 2012, I was promoted to lieutenant. That was became second in command to the chief. Previous to that, we did not have a lieutenant in our organization. So in that capacity, I was able to further enhance the community policing programs and the neighborhood watch programs. I was able to work on formalizing a mentoring and professional development program for all staff to include our professional staff. I was responsible for developing our entire budget and managing that budget throughout the years, which was about a $4.5 million budget. And I worked alongside the Public Safety Advisory Committee, who helped guide us in potential needed changes or issues within the neighborhoods. And in 2012, I also attended the FBI National Academy for Leadership in Quantico, Virginia, where I graduated. And then later, I was able to further that relationship with the FBI by becoming a task force officer, which I'll talk about a little bit later here. And over that 7-year period, I was able to be the acting chief many times because our chief would leave town, be on vacation, or just want to take a weekend off. So I became the first responder of our first responders. In 2015, I had the unfortunate experience of having to manage a real world active shooter event at our Reynolds High School, where we had over 200 law enforcement officers respond. And I had to manage 2,000 students and staff on campus. And we successfully as we could resolve that issue. But that was a very interesting experience to manage that many people in that short of a time. In 2016, the city of Troutdale decided to contract with Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, and all of the staff, including myself, were transferred over to Multnomah County. I originally was a lieutenant there and was in the patrol division, managed the civil unit. And in 2017, I was promoted to captain, where I was moved to manage the civil unit, our river patrol unit. Our river patrol unit largely does a lot of community events. So again, had a lot of opportunity to engage in the community policing aspect of law enforcement. Currently, I'm the head of our training division or training unit that delivers training to about 500 sworn corrections deputies and law enforcement personnel, along with civilian staff. In 2019, as I was talking about earlier, I had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. for 7 months and work alongside the FBI in their active shooter violence reduction unit, and furthered relationships with law enforcement across the country. Over the years, I've had the opportunity to rub elbows and meet and build lasting relationships with people from around the country and from around the world. Also, in that capacity, I was the acting chief deputy at several times. My specific qualifications for this job would be I hold an executive leadership certification through the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training. I'm an FBI National Academy graduate. I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice administration. I remain to be a task force officer on the Violence Reduction Active Shooter Initiative. I am the vice chair for the Oregon State Sheriff's Association Tactical Command Council, which helps develop and advises on use of force and policy and a lot of trainings around the state. I have a proven track record for mentoring, coaching, organizational culture building. I'm experienced as a leader in a mid-sized department in a great community similar to Newberg-Dundee. Experienced in critical management, public budgeting processes, and organizational process evaluation. And I have a very strong history of community engagement. And most of all, I love meeting new people and building lasting relationships.
Second question, please describe your philosophy and or approach to community policing. Can you share specific examples with us?
To me, community policing means that we're here to serve the community. It means we have to keep open communications with our residents, and they have to trust that we'll do what's right, not only when it's easy, but when it's hard. NDPD teaches and preaches customer service and compassion. It is important when an officer contacts someone that the person is left with their dignity. We always have to be professional and courteous while serving the public. An effective modern day police department has to be open to new ideas and encourage the community in non-enforcement events. Some of those examples would be like we participate in Shop with a Cop, Tip a Cop. We have a school resource officer program. We participate in Special Olympics. We have vacation home checks. We put on a Citizens Academy typically, although disrupted this year for obvious reasons. And then we also put on Safety Town. And then I participate in a group, Unidos is our group name, and that's a Latinx outreach program. Some of the other things we do, we have a suicide prevention and awareness car that is assigned to the school resource officer. And that's designed to help make connections with our students in the schools. Throughout my career, I've received a lot of letters with positive interactions, citizens that write letters to us about positive interactions with our officers, and I value that immensely. I know many instances in where officers from this department have taken money out of their own pockets and provided someone with food, clothing, maybe even a night to stay. These people are in need, and the officers recognize that and they use compassion. On most occasions, I hear about these instances from fellow officers or members of the public. Compassion for fellow humans is part of our culture, and it's valued in this department. I can give you another example of community policing. We had, I think it was it was about December of 2019. I remember specific incidents where a young mother passed away, and our officers showed up, felt pretty bad. It was right around Christmas time. They actually took money out of their own pockets, purchased gifts for the kids to hopefully give them a positive, something positive to remember Christmas by, instead of, probably the most tragic event that they could go through.
Yeah, absolutely. So community policing, just plain and simple, is relational partnership policing. And it appears that to a large degree that already exists due to the good work of the men and women of the Newberg-Dundee Police Department. I reviewed a lot of information from Facebook posts and news articles there, and it seems like there's a strong relationship that I would certainly like to step into and just continue to bolster. I want the members of Newberg and Dundee to see their police professionals as caring neighbors, and for our police professionals in the department to see their citizens as partners that they engage with to keep our community safe, welcoming, and with a high quality of life. If you think of a time when you might experience a problem, you probably go to a trusted friend, family member, colleague, something like that, to ask them for help. And that's what I want whenever a citizen in our city has a problem where police services are needed, that they think of their Newberg-Dundee police professionals as someone like that they can go to, that they trust, and have that strong relationship with. So a couple of examples of how I've achieved that in the past. We opened that storefront police station in West Plano whenever I supervised the neighborhood police officer unit there. And we had a grand opening and invited people in, but the real work began when we went out into the community. It's one thing for a police department to host events and invite community members to come in. And generally there you'll get, your biggest supporters, the people that are already really well entrenched to the police department. But you've got to reach out to every segment of the community and go where they are to develop those relationships, such as churches, civic groups, and other locations in the community to develop those relationships. One of the things that every police station that I have, or police department that I've worked at, has had that I'd certainly like to do if Newberg-Dundee doesn't have this, is what's called the Take Me Home program. And that is a great program where anybody who within our community may wonder, as in an elderly individual or a younger person, perhaps with autism, something like that, we're able to have information on file and photographs in case one of those folks happens to go missing, that we can get information out very, very quickly and get them back to their family members safely and efficiently. And those programs have been real successful in Forney and Plano as well. Last example is in Forney. Shortly after the George Floyd murder last year in 2020, Forney experienced its first ever protest. And while I had a decent amount of experience in dealing with protests, that was new for the community in Forney. And some people were really, really terrified of that based on what they had seen on the news. So we reached out to the protest organizers, developed relationships with them. We reached out to business owners in our downtown, brought them in with our planning process to ensure that the event was going to be safe. And I'm really happy to report that we facilitated that first protest with absolutely no violence. And it really went off very, very well. And then we had some subsequent protests after that, and all of those have gone out well too. So it's really that partnership and relational policing that is community policing, and we have to engage with all of our stakeholders in that process to accomplish our mission.
I feel the most essential parts of community policing is that really needs to be a daily behavior on the part of law enforcement. And when I talk about law enforcement, I'm talking about from the chief to the brand new person. It's also actually a duty of other departments within the city to help with community policing. That needs to be done through relationship building with citizens, business owners, elected officials, and other stakeholders. The reason it's so paramount is that it's too late to build relationships when things go wrong or when things are in chaos. And that was very apparent to me, that we had done a good job of that Troutdale when we did have that active shooter scenario in Troutdale, because the community came out and backed us and supported us and really helped us through that. These partnerships need to be forged with all stakeholders to solve livability and criminal activity and to create open communication channels. I believe the PD is the resource to help that happen. There needs to be transparency, and law enforcement needs to be approachable. And that is part of that community policing. It's everybody's job to do that. everybody's job to be part of community policing. And I think the people who might be watching this video at some point probably are already engaged in that in some sort if they're watching this. The specific example, which I think really shows the power of community policing, is we had a park in one of our neighborhoods where neighbors were calling and they were really frustrated with people being in the park after dark because the park's closed at dusk. And they felt like they didn't want to call and bother us because they thought we had other things that were more important. With working with several of those neighbors, I was able to help them build and start a neighborhood watch program and encourage them to call and call frequently. And we opened lines of communication via text, email, so that they didn't feel like they had to necessarily call dispatch, but also on the major stuff, asked them to call dispatch. Well, you'd think, people being in the park, no big deal. They're just making noise. Turns out that part of what was going on there was we interrupted a pretty large drug distribution program that was going on there, and they were using the park as a handoff location. And had we not been getting those phone calls, had we not had citizens paying attention, we would have never known that we had rather large quantities of heroin, methamphetamine being distributed through our park. Secondary to that, we had a similar situation with our businesses in a business district, and they were having a lot of vandalisms and theft. We again instituted a business watch program, opened those lines of communication, and we were successful in reducing the amount of incidents that were occurring in that area to the glee of the business owners. The most important part of community policing, I believe, is getting out of our cars and meeting people and meet them where they work, where they play. And you can do that through simple things like days where you have coffee with a cop and you're just out in the community and you put up a sign and say, talk to me. And as they're walking in, just greet them and spend time with them and get to building those lasting relationships.
Yeah, so my philosophy on community policing is all about relationships, building relationships, reaching out to the members of the community to listen to them, listen to better understand their perspective, to understand the challenges that they're facing, and listening to understand if they're experiencing gaps in service from the police department where we can improve. And I think going into building those relationships, it's important to really be open to hearing feedback that may not always be what you want to hear or what you expect to hear, but being able to support folks that are willing to work with the police department and bring forward some of their concerns. And then also just, to build a program within the department with a team approach where we're not just working with one member of the police department or the police chief being the face of community policing. It's everybody within the department being on the same page and understanding that we are working towards a common goal, which is providing service to everybody in the community. Not just a select group, but understanding the different needs and challenges that are out there for all individuals in the community, and working together to bridge those service gaps and work as a team to provide better service to the community. Some examples of things that I've done in the past. I've worked with citizen groups to develop a Citizens Police Academy. To invite folks in, stakeholders and community members in to see a behind the scenes look at the police department, come in and understand a little bit more about what we do and why we do it, and allow them the opportunity to ask some questions and find out how we can provide better service to them. We've put out an annual report, which I think is really important to have some transparency with what we're doing in the community and what doing as a police department, transparency with our policies, practices, our procedures, and being able to share that out with the community members. I think that builds trust, it builds legitimacy within the department and within the community. And that's really an important piece of community policing. And another example is conversations that we started last June within the Port of Portland. We were talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in our organization and what our police department's role is in that. And so myself and one of our lieutenants reached out to our diversity, equity, and inclusion program manager and began hosting some town hall style meetings on a weekly basis to discuss. At the time, it was mainly focused on the police department and giving folks a chance to understand better the police department and its relationship to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's now evolved into other topics that we are included in and we're involved in, and we join in on the discussions, but it's not just centered around law enforcement or the police department, it's other aspects of what we do in our community. And so those have been very successful. And I think that was a extremely positive, community policing project that we worked on. And we have continued to kind of an offshoot of that to host on a monthly basis what we call our connecting conversations, where I host conversations where we are more centered around policing, because we know there's still a lot of questions. A lot of people still have questions and just want to learn more about what we do and why we do it. So we kind of have that open town hall style meeting again, where folks can come and we can talk about a specific topic, question and answer sessions, and just kind of open the doors and let people have a behind the scenes look and ask. It's open format, so ask whatever they want to ask, and we work to answer those questions for folks.
So kind of following along with that last question, what do you believe is the community's role in local policing?
Absolutely. So, Sir Robert Peel back in the 1800s said something similar to the effect of that the police are the public are the police, where the police are the only members of the community that are paid full time to engage in responsibilities, though, that are incumbent upon every citizen. And just like I said with my answer on community policing, we have to engage with our community as partners to accomplish that policing mission. We have to do the hard work of identifying root causes of problems and working with stakeholders to institute long-term solutions. We may have an issue where making an arrest is the most appropriate solution, and that might solve it, but that might just be a short-term solution that does not address the problem. We may take someone for a mental health evaluation and get them immediate assistance, but if there's not appropriate follow-up, we're certain that we're going to deal with that individual again and again if we don't work with them on a longer-term solution and ensure that they're getting the assistance that they need. In our great nation, our government exists based upon the will and the consent of the people. And one of the biggest investments that we have as police professionals is the public trust that our citizens give to us. And it is our solemn duty to safeguard that public trust in everything that we do. So in addition to partnering with us on a daily basis to solve problems, crime, and quality of life related issues, I like to engage with the community in as many ways as possible. This includes having an advisory council, which it's my understanding from what I've read that already exists with representation from both Newberg and Dundee. I'm certainly very interested in making sure that that is a strong program where we get good feedback from our community. I'd also like to make sure that we have representation from the police department in civic groups, in our school system, at George Fox University, and of course, having strong relationships among other city departments inside the City of Newberg organization. I facilitated and hosted open town hall forums in both Forney and in Plano, where we will have a short presentation and then there's a dialogue and an unscripted dialogue that can be a little nerve-wracking, but it's transparent, and it's a great way to communicate with the public and give them the opportunity to engage directly with us. In the past, what I've done is partnered with local restaurants or local places where folks gather and utilized, some of their customer base to make sure that we reach out to a broad segment of the community, incorporate different folks' schedules, times, and things like that to make sure that we can reach as many folks as possible. When police agencies and their communities establish these strong partnerships, the impact on the efficiency and the effectiveness in which those problems, criminal activity, and quality of life issues can be addressed dramatically increases. And that's what I'd like to help facilitate in Newberg and Dundee.
I believe the community's role in local policing is getting involved. Like I said earlier, I think if people are watching this interview, they're already involved in some way. They've already got an interest in their police department, and they should, because their police department is what's going to help make their community a great place to be and a safer place to be. And so you have to have participation. The citizens have to participate with us. They have to communicate with us. We need them to call, even on the low level stuff, like I was talking about earlier in that situation in the park, where had they not called, we wouldn't have known, and we couldn't have helped them solve the livability issue of all the noise and the cars coming and going at odd hours. And a lot of times, like I said, people will say, well, we don't want to bother you with that small stuff. And I tell citizens all the time, just report it, please report it. And if we're too busy on something bigger, it'll just take us longer to get there. But if not, we'll come and we'll talk to you, and hopefully we can help solve that. But we've got to have that participation. Most importantly, we need the community's trust, but we have to earn that trust, and then we have to keep that trust. And then we need the citizens to help us continually improve by participating and communicating with us. And if we do surveys, be honest with us and reach out to us or approach us, out on the street and talk to us and tell us, hey, we need this or that or better. There's other ways for them to take part in policing through citizen volunteer programs, whether that's becoming a volunteer police officer or just volunteering at events in the parks. Public safety advisory committees are a great way to be involved. And that's an opportunity for citizens to volunteer along with police department and other city members to solicit information from the public so that we can make a planned approach on how to solve those things.
I think the community's role is I think they should have high expectations of their police department. I think they should have high expectations for an equitable delivery of services throughout the community. And I think, it's incumbent upon the police department, the members of the department, to build that trust and to build those relationships, so the members of the community do feel comfortable coming to our doors, coming inside our police department and meeting with us. And I also feel that it's important for us to go out and meet them in their neighborhoods, in their businesses, in their homes, and get to understand them in their day-to-day lives and what their expectations are of us. I think we're seeing more and more people are willing to step up and be involved in their communities. And I think that's because communities and police departments in particular are reaching out, trying to build those relationships, bridge those gaps, and offer, to be more transparent with the community. So I know there's a lot of people, when you start meeting with them and you start asking and you start providing them with opportunities, that they've been waiting for that opportunity. A lot of times we hear that they've been waiting for somebody to reach out to them. So, and I just think it's important for them to continue to ask tough questions and to share what their experiences are. And if we ask them to do that, we have to be open and receptive to the feedback that we hear. And we have to be able to, rise to the occasion and help bridge some of those gaps in service that we know exist out there.
I think the community's role is sort of a checks and balances in their local government. We're working on their behalf and their consent. If a member of the community asks why we do certain things, and the answer is, and the only answer I can come up with is, well, because that's the way we've always done it, I'm not comfortable with that answer. We need to be thoughtful in how we move forward. As an example of that was I had someone ask me why we put all the booking photos on our press releases for arrests. Unless we're looking for potential or more victims of the same crime, I couldn't really come up with a good reason. I ran it by a couple of our folks in our management group. We all couldn't come up with a reason. So as a result, we no longer provide a DMV photo or booking photo with an arrest unless we have more, we're looking for more potential victims. So I would say that's a good role of checks and balances and listening to our community and trying to be something for everybody.
Newberg-Dundee is comprised of diverse communities. How would you ensure that the department under your leadership provides exemplary service across all of the communities that it serves?
Again, that goes back to relationships and relationship building. And those don't happen in a vacuum. You have to get out. You have to start meeting the communities where they are, where they work, where they live. And through building those relationships, you open that door, and then the agency has to demonstrate, and I believe this is, top leadership of the organization, of the city, has to demonstrate these qualities. They have to be going out and touching the communities and talking to the communities and listening, honestly listening, offering listening sessions to the community to come in and just talk about what's going on in their neighborhood or what their biggest issue is in their neighborhood. Establishing clear and understandable conduct values for all staff, and making it a priority that our officers, that our staff are professional, that they are reaching out to those citizens on a daily basis. Policy evaluation is important, and delivering the most up-to-date training available to staff. Implementing a very strong coaching, mentoring program, a professional development program for staff is important, because when you have better trained staff and more equipped staff, they're going to be more professional. They're going to be more willing to engage. Wellness programs for staff is important too, because it's a known fact that if your staff is healthy and they're happy, they deliver better service. So implementing a formalized wellness program will help deliver those things. But getting connected with faith-based organizations and communities through formal and informal meetings. One of the things we did in Troutdale is we started a faith-based program where we had several of the leaders from those organizations that we would meet, and we just have a coffee hour, and we get all together, and we made connections through that, and really started to make connections with the communities they served. And many of the customer service surveys that are out there, there's a lot of ways to do customer service surveys, and I know Newberg-Dundee's done some of those already, actually in preparation for this process. But I think a yearly customer service survey and then follow through. When people identify that they have an issue, we have to answer that. And then through organized community policing projects for all staff, that includes the chief.
Well, the first thing I would do is I would reach out to community members and community leaders and have some open dialogue and ask for some feedback. Maybe do some surveys, maybe do some town hall style meetings. Try to get to know where the community feels we are as a police department and where the community wants to see us go as a police department. And to make sure that we're providing services across all communities, I would make sure that, within the police department, we would put together a strategic plan that outlined what our goals are, what our values are as a department and as a community. And one of the pillars of that strategic plan would be to provide an inclusive community, to provide services in an equitable manner to all members of the police department, and just kind of make a statement right from the beginning that this is where we're going to go, this is what we're going to do, and then start working within the police department. It needs to be a team approach. It can't just be a top down or the chief being the only one out there in the community. It needs to be a team approach and have everybody going out and talking. And I think when we invite people in, something that I've seen in the past that's been successful, hosting an equity town hall style meeting to invite folks to come and talk, share their experiences. And as a police department and as a police chief, it's important to be willing to listen to what people are speaking as their experiences and what their truth is, and understanding it and working to improve on services and to make sure that we are delivering services equitably throughout the community. There's always going to be opportunities for us to meet with folks. I know there's inviting people into our department, hosting things, but there's also opportunities for us to go out into the community and to reach out to people, like I said, in their workplace, in their neighborhoods, in their communities, going to different community functions and seeing people truly in their environment and getting to understand them. I think, I think that would get us a really good start. And I think that would put us on the right direction, having an understanding and stating some goals and objectives, and then working to meet with folks and start to roll some things out. And
well, first and foremost, we have to hire quality people to be on our team. That's absolutely paramount. The city has embraced, or is developing and continually to develop, diversity, equity, and inclusion program. I've embraced that from the very inception. I think anytime we have a chance to add diversity to our workforce, we should seize that opportunity. I believe it brings a different kind of credibility to our department when we look like the community that we serve. As an example, I've worked with our human resources team to advertise our latest job openings in national publications for more women and minority candidates. I think that's important. That's the first time we've ever done that. It's not that I was ever against it. I just hadn't thought of that. So I appreciate the new ideas or new approaches to old hirings or processes. I think it's important to be open. As a leader of the department, I absolutely support diversity in our workforce. As I mentioned Unidos earlier, this is a Latinx outreach program. I enjoy meeting with the group. I feel like we have productive meetings. We share our experiences. One of those experiences, I think it was probably about 3 years ago, and it still sticks with me today. One of our members was walking down the street, saw a police car, had the feeling of nervousness and tension and anxiety, and didn't really know what to expect. And the officer recognized her and rolled down the window and spoke to her in Spanish, which totally washed away all of her anxiety. And I think that's the type of police department we want to be. I really cherished that her sharing that story with me. It gave me a lot to think about.
So in a couple of my other answers, I've talked about the importance of community policing, partnership, relational policing, and those answers are important here too. But specific to this question, what gets measured is what's important. So I'd like to take a hard look at how the Newberg-Dundee Police Department is tracking its work product. Are we capturing data that tells us how we're doing in developing these relationships across all segments of our community? And if we're providing that equitable, excellent service across all those groups as well. As a professional police leader, I have long valued diverse backgrounds, demographic variables, life experience, and points of view that differ from mine to bring to the table an overall more well-rounded solution. I have built and had the privilege of working with some incredible, very high-functioning teams that were composed of just many, many different kinds of folks. And that value of diversity and recognizing that marginalized police service is a threat to the overall community is something that I believe strongly in. Police departments should aspire to reflect the communities that they serve. So we have to work hard to recruit women, people of color, varied orientations, members of different faiths, and others inside of our department, so that folks see a police department that reflects upon them and their community. A more diverse police department is generally more apt to serve its community more holistically and creatively, particularly one that's growing like Newberg and Dundee. I have absolutely no tolerance for bigotry, and I expect my colleagues to provide professional police services to everyone with whom they interact with, just like it was a member of their family. I have a strong record of developing positive, proactive relationships with all members of the communities that I've served by just interacting with them, speaking at congregations, attending men's or women's groups, and participating in community events and activities. And I would certainly do the same in Newberg and Dundee. This is a struggle that policing is facing all across the nation. And it's unfortunately been something that the police profession is kind of hidden behind in saying, well, the reason we don't have more X, whether that be women or people of color or whatever, is that they don't apply. Well, lots of times they don't apply because they don't see themselves fitting within that department. So we actually did a project on this exact topic in my School of Executive Leadership. And there are some effective creative ways of addressing this. So one is we need to have a really high quality recruitment video that showcases what our department, what our community is about, highlighting the aspects of diversity that we have to the table and making sure that it's well known outside of our department that that's something that we value. So we need to have a high quality recruitment video that needs to be reflected on our website, our social media pages and things like that, because that's where potential applicants go to try to get information about us. Then second to that is just like forming those key relationships with all segments of the community, we've got to go to those locations where broader members of our community in a more diverse way are at. So we've got to go to historically Black colleges. We've got to go to places where members of the LGBTQ community are at and speak to them and say, we are welcome for qualified applicants to come and be a part of the Newberg-Dundee Police Department. So we have to do that work and reach out there. It's not just enough to put it on a website and say, hey, come and apply, and then hope for the best. We've got to develop those relationships and encourage those. I also, to the degree that it's possible in an agency our size, to have citizen police academies and or explorer programs, those can be really effective pipelines for getting people better acquainted with the department and getting people to apply in that way simply by spreading through word of mouth and even some of those people that actually participate in those programs themselves.
Number 5, last question. Policing has been under an increasingly intense microscope over the last several years. What have you learned? How would you use those lessons learned to lead Newberg-Dundee's police department?
So, yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I think one of the things that I've learned is, law enforcement is under a microscope. And that was something that I learned early on in my career, even 20 plus years ago. I will say that what I see in my day-to-day interactions with the community is that we have a tremendous amount of support in the community for good policing and for good police officers. So I still think the majority of our interactions with the public are positive. And I think, you know, the public expects and they have a right to ultimate transparency. What we're doing as a police department should not be a secret. You know, how we go about, you know, developing our policies, what we're doing, you know, procedurally, and how we interact with the public. All of that stuff should be readily available to members of the public when they come and ask questions or they want to see what we're doing. So I think just the ability to put more information out there is, I think, one of the lessons that I've learned over the last couple of years specifically. How can we communicate to the public better what we do and why we do it? And I think that I've been able to do some of those things in my current assignment. Again, putting out an annual report. I'm putting out our first ever annual use of force report that discussed all of the use of force incidents that we had for a calendar year, really kind of diving down into some of the numbers and then, you know, sharing that with our community and showing them what we're doing. And some things were good. Some things we looked at and we realized that we had opportunities to make some improvements. But we have to be open to listening and learning and accepting feedback. And when we, you know, I talk a lot about transparency, and when we provide information, it needs to be, you know, very transparent and not diluted or, you know, changing of, you know, numbers or statistical data to try to match what we think people want to hear. We just need to be open and honest and share with them. And if we're criticized for things that we're doing, we need to be open to that feedback and look internally to see if there's things we can do better or see if it's maybe a breakdown in communication. You know, we have to commit as an agency to doing things differently. Nothing stays the same, especially in law enforcement. It's rapidly evolving. And we have to constantly be looking at how we can improve, continue to improve, and make our department better every day. There's a lot of opportunities out there for us to do more training. And I think that's one of the things that we've learned as a profession over the last couple of years is how we train, what we're training our officers on, what is our focus, maybe some of the things that we've traditionally focused on, we still need to do, but we also need to add in other curriculum, de-escalation training, looking at our response to calls for service a little bit differently, how we deal with those in mental health crisis, you know, having officers trained in how to deal with people that are experiencing a mental health crisis. How are we, you know, tracking and trending our use of force incidents? You know, looking at how we deal with our homeless populations. What is the role of law enforcement in that? And so there's a lot of things out there that we have traditionally been expected to be a part of, tasks that we've been asked to do, and now there's better training opportunities out there, and there's some things that aren't very expensive to do. There's some things that are very cost neutral. There's a lot of services out there and people willing to come and provide training for law enforcement. The State Police Academy is one of them. DPSST provides some opportunities, but there's also some national organizations. And we've, you know, at the Port of Portland, we just recently put on some training for de-escalation. And that was free to our department. We were able to get the curriculum for free. We selected some of our trainers to put that curriculum on. I put on a presentation, a classroom presentation, and then we did some hands-on stuff. And so it doesn't always have to be expensive. So there's resources out there, and that's probably one of the most important things that I've learned is that we need to constantly be evolving, and we need to be creative in how we do that. Looking for opportunities to improve our service and meet the expectations of the community, and also being fiscally responsible and seeking out maybe grant funding or curriculums or things of that nature that don't necessarily cost a lot of money. So, and I think, one of the most important things that I see with the Newberg Police Department, obviously, is the accreditation. They've been accredited for many years. And to me, that's extremely important because I think that builds trust in the community. It builds, legitimacy of our police department. And that's something that I have experience with in the past, and I'm a strong proponent of. And I'm happy to see that Newberg is accredited. And it's important that we, keep that going.
First, I've learned that we have a really resilient workforce that comes to work every day to work hard and protect our community. We've had many challenges and navigated them pretty successfully. I'm not going to say perfectly because I don't think you can be perfect, but that's what we strive for, even though we know we're not going to achieve it. It's still a goal of ours as a department, and as a leader, that's the message that we provide. As a police agency, I think we need to respond to calls more thoughtfully, and I think we have. We can always continue to evolve and do things better. I think we're using more deductive reasoning about how we'll handle the calls that we respond to. What's the best outcome for the person involved versus, well, it's a crime, so we're going to arrest them. We use a lot of evidence-based decision-making. In other words, taking everything in the surrounding, everything in front of you that you can possibly take in before you make that decision and what's best for the person. I think that's been a big evolution. Police work's always been changing. At this point in time, I think it's evolving more rapidly than I've ever seen in my career. Not that it's a extremely long career, but in a couple of decades, it's been evolving pretty fast. So I think one of the things we need to do, and we have done, and we can again always do better, is listen to the public and improve our transparency. At this time, people still want to feel safe, and we want to continue to evolve and come up with more strategies to be something to everyone. I think that's going to be important moving forward. One of the ways that I'm trying to improve our transparency is I've applied for a grant to obtain body-worn cameras. I think probably about 90% of our officers are very, very excited about this program, and the other 10% will come along. They'll see the value and benefits of those. I've already developed the framework of the policies, but I'm not tied to them. I look forward to having some community input as well as officer input. I think cameras will highlight much of the good work that we do. It'll eliminate a lot of the he said, she said on either side. And I think it'll reduce, we don't have a lot of citizen complaints, but I think the ones that we do get, it'll reduce the time spent on those. It'll also provide areas that we can learn from and improve on in our policing. Much of the research I've read about pretty much says that everyone acts a little bit better when they know they're being recorded. So I'm looking forward to that. Another thing I think we can improve on our transparency is we do a lot of reports that people don't even know about, checks and balances within our department. And I would like to be able to put that on a website that reflects all the work that we are doing. So that's what I've learned throughout this this year through COVID and then other, pretty tumultuous events. I don't know that I'm not challenging anybody, but I don't know what else you could squeeze into this last year. There's been a lot going on. I think we've handled it pretty well. We can always do better though.
Absolutely. So, this is an incredibly challenging time in policing, but it's also ripe with opportunity to engage our communities in new, more open and inclusive ways. And probably one of the most important things is culture within the organization. And I believe that that starts with having a direction that everyone is bought into, from your line level folks to command staff to city leaders to our citizens. We have to all be on the same page in terms of what police services are supposed to look like and how we're supposed to go about our job. If you, as a patron of a business, go somewhere and you get bad service, in general, you can just take your money and go somewhere else. In local government, that's really hard. I mean, we have jurisdictional boundaries, right? If there's a crime that happens inside of Newberg and Dundee, the Newberg-Dundee Police Department is responsible for that. You live outside the city limits, that's the sheriff's department, and so on. So members of our community can't just go to another police agency and say, hey, I want to use you because I didn't get good service over here. So getting folks to understand that, making sure that I instill in them the importance of serving as a professional public safety servant leader is paramount. To answer this question holistically, I think it would be remiss if I did not mention police uses of force. Police uses of force are very polarizing. When police officers respond to resistance or aggression by suspects and they use force to do so, each one of those incidents has to be reviewed. As a chief, it's my job to make sure that if officers use physical force appropriately and in a way that ensures that each person is treated with dignity and respect, even if they're resisting or using aggression, it's my job to support that reasonable and lawful use of force. And it's also my job to make sure that the public understands why certain tactics are used. So we have to communicate. We have to be transparent. We can't hide behind that's under investigation and we'll hope that you forget about it and another news cycle comes along. We've got to be transparent and upfront about any police use of force that occurs. It's also my job to ensure that our officers are provided with the highest quality training possible to ensure that they're well prepared to handle every rapidly evolving situation by employing all the necessary tactics. We can't do training in a silo. We can't send officers one day to practice firearms tactics on the range and send them another day to practice de-escalation and verbal judo type skills. We got to combine those two things because you have to be able to pull from every aspect of your tool belt when a situation calls for it. And that's my job to make sure that we have that quality of training. Should officers use tactics that's outside their training or outside of policy or the law, it's my job to hold them accountable, and I'll certainly do that. As a police chief, my primary responsibility is really two things. One is the accomplishment of the policing mission in our community, and two is ensuring that the men and women that are entrusted to me are well taken care of. The best employees of any organization are both happy to go to work and they're happy to go home. And it's absolutely my job to ensure that we have a work environment where that is as possible as it can be. And I don't take that responsibility at all lightly. Probably the most important thing that I have learned as the police profession has continued to evolve, and you probably notice in listening to this, that I don't use the term law enforcement all that much. Law enforcement always has been and always will be a very important part of police work, but being a police professional is so much more than that now. We're called to do all kinds of things and solve problems in very creative ways that role has really, really expanded. So in serving as the Newberg-Dundee Police Chief, you'll see a lot of me out and about in the community, patrolling with the incredible women and men of the department, attending events, and just being a good neighbor. And that's what I've learned in my experience and what I'd like to bring to the table.
Yeah, there's been many lessons learned in the last few years. And actually, I would go back to about 2015 was when I first realized that there was a need for a change in direction for law enforcement back when Ferguson, Missouri had their terminal. And it kind of spread less so then than recent years, this last year and a half. But I really realized that there was a need to take a more critical look at how we were responding to incidents, how we were dealing with incidents, how we were training officers, and what tools we were giving them. So I've learned that it's too late to fix a broken relationship when it's completely gone bad. Public trust has been eroded over the years. Lack of communication and transparency is part of that. Some of the public doesn't understand what law enforcement does, and that's law enforcement's fault because we haven't communicated and we haven't done a good enough job to host things like citizens academies or ride-along programs, or just getting out and building those relationships. So those citizen volunteer relationships are key. Employee wellness, again, is a crucial part of that. We need to have healthy officers, because if we have healthy officers, they're more likely to behave the way they should. And so the way I would use those tools or those lessons to lead is I already know that Newberg-Dundee is a well-respected and professional agency. I've taken the opportunity actually to travel through the area several times and spend a little bit of time talking to some of the business owners and some citizens and just ask them, what do you think about your police department? And it's a good sign when you hear good things. And I heard nothing but good things, and that's great, but we can always do better. And the way we do better is we go outside, we start looking at what the best practices are nationally, internationally. We bring in trainings, the most up-to-date trainings. We evaluate our policies and our procedures against those best practices and state and federal law to make sure that we're on the cutting edge and the leading edge of doing the best. I have access to literally thousands of leaders around the country and the world through my professional relationships and associations. And there's other communities, similar size, similar problems. We can get that information in a heartbeat, and we can see what they did right and what they did wrong and how it worked out. We don't have to be building the wheel. And so soliciting participation and input from all segments of society through formal and informal surveys, again, possibly through a public safety advisory committee is great. Again, being transparent while not endangering the public or potential apprehension of suspects. Host community events and meetings twice yearly. People will show up, they'll talk. We did them in Troutdale and it was amazing. We get 50, 60 people there, and it was great to hear them and discuss with them and build those relationships. I'm still friends with a lot of those people today. Again, training curriculums have to be evaluated, and we need to be exceeding the industry standards. And we need to focus on that well-rounded wellness program, critical. Not only is it going to deliver more professional, better service, but it's the right thing to do for our staff and for our public.